Entire fleets surrendered without a single shot because something impossible happened on a forgotten mining world. And the one who caused it wasn't a legend or a hero, just a tired human who refused to stop caring. If you're watching this, tell me where you're from and subscribe. This channel grows when humans stand together. Now, the story begins. The drill bit screamed against crystalline rock, throwing sparks that died in the perpetual dust of Sector 9. Elias Dorn wiped sweat from his forehead with a rag that had stopped being white sometime around the previous administration. 47 years old, every one of them written in the lines around his eyes and the gray threading through his beard. "Another productive day in paradise, Rusty," he muttered to the mechanical dog sitting near the equipment cache. The thing's optical sensors flickered in what Elias had decided to interpret as agreement. He'd built Rusty from salvaged mining drones and a personality chip he'd pulled from a defunct survey bot. The result was something that followed him around, occasionally made encouraging beeps, and never asked uncomfortable questions about why a man would choose to live alone on a forgotten rock at the edge of dead Empire space. Which made Rusty the best roommate Elias had ever had. The neural quartz extraction site stretched out before him, a maze of fissures and crystalline outcroppings that glowed faintly in the dim light of Carthun's distant sun. The crystals were valuable, something about storing biological electrical impulses, which meant corporations paid well and asked few questions about the men willing to dig them up in a place where the last war had turned the landscape into a graveyard. Elias preferred it that way. Fewer people meant fewer conversations. Fewer conversations meant fewer opportunities for someone to look at him with that particular expression of pity reserved for men who'd lost everything and survived anyway. He was about to call it a day when he heard it. A sound like breathing. Deep, slow, coming from beneath the rock. Elias froze. In 3 years of working this site, the only sounds had been his equipment, the wind, and occasionally Rusty's servos when they needed oil. He looked at the mechanical dog. "Tell me you heard that." Rusty's sensors swiveled toward a nearby fissure. Definite acknowledgement. "Great. Now we're both crazy." But curiosity was a stubborn thing, even in a man who'd tried to bury it under layers of routine and resignation. Elias grabbed his cutting torch and approached the crack in the crystalline formation. The breathing sound grew stronger, regular, deliberate. Something was alive down there. The fissure was narrow, barely wide enough for him to squeeze through, but Elias had spent enough time in tight spaces that claustrophobia had become more of a casual acquaintance than an enemy. He wedged himself into the gap, torch in one hand, following the sound deeper into the crystal vein. The passage opened into a chamber he'd never seen before, and in the center, suspended in translucent crystal that pulsed with golden light, was a cocoon. It was massive, easily 3 meters tall, organic and geometric at the same time. Through the semi-transparent surface, he could see a shape, humanoid, covered in plates that reflected light like faceted gems, and it was suffocating. He could see it in the way the figure moved, slight spasms, the desperate rhythm of something fighting for air. Elias had seen men die slowly in collapsed tunnels. He knew what that struggle looked like. Every bit of sense he had left screamed at him to back away, to report this, to let someone else handle whatever impossible thing he'd just found. But Elias Dorn had spent 3 years running from the memory of turning his back on things that mattered. 3 years of waking up to silence and wondering if he'd used up all his capacity to give a damn about anything. He lit the torch. The cutting beam bit into crystal, and the material shrieked as it parted. The cocoon split, and the figure inside collapsed forward. Elias barely caught it, staggering under weight that shouldn't have been possible, arms full of something that was definitely not human, but felt fragile in a way that transcended species. The being's eyes opened, pure gold, like molten metal, staring up at him with an expression that might have been confusion or might have been hope. It tried to speak. The words were crystalline, musical, completely incomprehensible. Elias looked down at this impossible creature, at the way its chest heaved with desperate breaths, at the cracks in its crystalline skin that wept something luminous. "Easy," he said quietly. "You're free now, whatever the hell you are." The golden eyes held his for a moment longer. Then the being's head fell back, unconscious, and Elias was left standing in a crystal chamber, holding something that should have been extinct, wondering what exactly he'd just done. Behind him, rusty sensors cast a soft blue glow over the scene. The mechanical dog sat down, waiting, like it knew everything was about to change. Elias looked at the being in his arms, then at the narrow passage he'd somehow have to drag this thing through. "Rusty," he said tiredly, "I think we're going to need a bigger shed." Elias woke to the sound of glass shattering. He rolled off his cot, hand reaching automatically for the plasma cutter he kept by the door, years of combat instinct kicking in before his brain fully engaged. The chronometer on the wall read low 300 hours. Outside, Carthoon's twin moons painted everything in silver and shadow. The shattering sound came again, from the storage shed, where he'd dragged the 3-meter-tall crystalline being approximately 6 hours ago. "Right," Elias muttered, pulling on his boots, "because this night wasn't weird enough already." Rusty was already at the shed door, sensors flickering in what Elias had learned to recognize as excitement or concern. The emotional range of a salvaged personality chip wasn't exactly nuanced. "Stay," Elias commanded. Rusty sat. "Good dog." Elias opened the door. The being was standing. Correction, the being was trying to stand, having apparently decided that Elias's spare parts shelf was an appropriate handhold. Said shelf was now scattered across the floor in a constellation of shattered components, and then it turned to face him. In the better light of the shed, Elias could actually see what he'd rescued. She, he corrected himself, because despite the alien features there was something distinctly feminine in the angular face and the way she moved. Tall, impossibly tall, with skin that looked like it had been carved from living opal. Plates of bioluminescent crystal ran along her arms and neck, pulsing with soft golden light. Her eyes were pure amber, no pupils, just depthless pools of liquid metal. She opened her mouth to speak. The sound that emerged would have been beautiful if it hadn't immediately blown out every light bulb in the shed and cracked 3 of the windows. "Okay," Elias said, hands up in what he desperately hoped was a universal gesture for "please stop." "Okay, definitely not a tourist. Let's maybe try whispering." The being tilted her head, bird-like, processing. When she spoke again, the volume was lower, but the words were still that same crystalline language he couldn't understand. Musical and utterly foreign. They stared at each other in the darkness, 2 entirely different species trying to figure out what the hell came next. Elias sighed and went to get water. The next hour was an exercise in improvisation. The being, he discovered, could drink water and eat, though she approached the protein bar he offered with the kind of suspicion usually reserved for live grenades. She managed 3 bites before making a face that transcended language barriers. "Yeah, that's fair," Elias thought. They tasted like cardboard mixed with shame. He tried words, pointed at himself. "Elias?" Then at her, raising his eyebrows in question. She watched him for a long moment. Then, in a voice like wind through crystal caves, she said something that sounded like "Sirval." "Sirval," Elias repeated. "Close enough." He pointed at the water. "Water." At the protein bar. "Food. Terrible food, but food." She mimicked the words, her accent turning them into something musical and strange. They went through a dozen more objects before Elias realized he was smiling for the first time in months. Then the lights in the main colony started flickering. Elias's comm unit buzzed. Colony administration, wanting to know if he was experiencing power fluctuations. He glanced at Sirval, who was currently making Rusty's sensors go haywire just by proximity. "Yeah," he told the comm. "Must be the storm season starting early. I'll check my generator." He clicked off before they could ask more questions. Sirval was watching him with those impossible eyes. She pointed at the comm unit, then at herself, making a gesture that might have been a question. "No," Elias said firmly. "Nobody knows you're here. And that's how it's staying." She didn't understand the words, but something in his tone must have translated. She nodded slowly, then did something unexpected. She sat down, just folded those long crystalline legs and settled onto the floor of his shed, making herself smaller, less threatening. It was such a deliberately human gesture that Elias found himself sitting too, back against the wall, Rusty settling between them like some kind of mechanical mediator. "So," Elias said into the silence, "come here often?" Sirval's head tilted again. She was learning, he realized. Cataloging his expressions, his tones, filing away information with the kind of intelligence that made his old soldier instincts prickle. Outside, the colony lights stabilized. The night settled into something almost peaceful, and Elias Dorn, who'd spent 3 years perfecting the art of being alone, found himself having a conversation with a being that shouldn't exist, using a vocabulary of maybe 30 words and a lot of gesture. When dawn finally started to gray the horizon, Sirval had learned the words for water, food, sleep, danger, and hide. Elias had learned that she could dim her bioluminescence voluntarily, that she found Rusty fascinating, and that something about this situation scared her almost as much as it scared him, which meant she was either smarter than he'd thought, or they were both in more trouble than he'd imagined. Probably both. As Sirval finally laid down on the pile of thermal blankets he'd arranged, her glow dimming to almost nothing, Elias stepped outside to watch the sunrise. His comm unit buzzed again. This time it was a priority alert from Colonial Administration. "Attention all Sector 9 personnel. Unidentified energy signature detected in subsurface crystal formations. Investigation team arriving 0800 hours. Report any anomalies immediately." Elias looked back at the shed, at the faint golden glow seeping through the cracks in the door. "Rusty," he said quietly, "I think we just graduated from simple to complicated." The mechanical dog's sensors pulsed once, definitely agreement. By day 3, Sirval had learned 47 words, and Elias had started forgetting why hiding a 3-meter-tall crystalline alien in his storage shed had seemed like a bad idea. "Person," she said carefully, pointing at the photo frame Elias kept on the shelf. Her pronunciation was getting better, the crystalline harmonics of her voice learning to wrap around human phonetics. Elias looked at the picture. Sarah and Ben, frozen in a moment of sunlight and laughter that felt like it belonged to someone else's life. Taken maybe a week before the bombardment, before the Zirathi dreadnought had turned the civilian shelter into a crater. "Yes," he said quietly. "Person. Family." Sirval picked up the frame with surprising gentleness, her crystalline fingers handling the cheap plastic like it was sacred. She studied Sarah's face, then Ben's, then looked at Elias with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Family," she repeated, then pointing at the empty space where they should be. "Gone?" The word hit harder than it should have, maybe because her accent made it sound like a song, maybe because it was the first time in 3 years someone had asked instead of assumed. "Gone," Elias confirmed. He found himself talking, words spilling out in a way they hadn't since he'd left the service. "Zirathi attack. 217 years ago, your species and mine tried very hard to kill each other. They succeeded, at least with my part of the equation." Sirval didn't understand most of the words, but she understood the tone. She set the picture down carefully and did something that made Elias's breath catch. She touched her own chest, right where a human heart would be, and said something in her language. Then, in broken English, "I understand loss. My species died for my mercy." The way she said it, with such absolute certainty, made Elias realize he wasn't the only one carrying ghosts. They sat in silence after that, the kind that felt less like absence and more like understanding. Rusty broke the moment by rolling over and presenting his belly for scratches. Sirval made a sound that might have been a laugh. and Elias found himself explaining the concept of mechanical affection to an alien who looked at Rusty like he'd just performed a miracle. "Machine," he said, pointing at Rusty. "Not alive, but acts like alive." Sirval studied the mechanical dog with those golden eyes. Then she reached out, hesitant, and ran her fingers over Rusty's sensor array. The dog's systems hummed in response, and something in Sirval's expression shifted. "Machine," she said slowly, "but chooses to love." "Yeah," Elias said. "I guess that's one way to put it." She looked at him then, really looked, and said something in Zirathi that sounded like poetry. Then, in English, "You build love from broken things." Elias didn't have an answer for that. The dream started that night. He jerked awake at 0200, heart hammering, Sarah's scream still echoing in his ears. But this time, the dream had been different. This time, he'd seen it from above, through a cockpit window, watching the targeting computer lock onto the shelter, feeling the pilot's hands shake on the controls, hearing the pilot pray in a language Elias shouldn't understand that the intelligence was right, that this really was a military target, that the children his sensors were detecting were some kind of mistake. Elias stumbled out of bed and threw up in the waste reclamation unit. When he finally made it outside, Rusty was sitting by the shed door, sensors pulsing in distress. Inside, he could hear Sirval moving, restless. The golden glow under the door was brighter than usual, pulsing like a heartbeat. He opened the door. She was standing, arms wrapped around herself, her bioluminescence flickering like a dying star. When she saw him, she said one word. "Sorry." Elias understood then. The energy colonial administration had detected, the power fluctuations, the dreams the colony had been reporting for the past 3 days, vivid nightmares and foreign memories that made no sense. It was her. Whatever she was, whatever power she carried, it was leaking out, infecting the neural quartz in the ground, turning the entire colony into a receiver for memories that weren't their own. "The dreams," he said. "That was you?" She nodded, miserable, made a gesture at her chest, at the cracks in her crystalline skin that still hadn't fully healed. "Broken," she said. "Leaking." Elias should have been angry, should have been terrified, should have been calling colonial administration right that second. Instead, he found himself asking, "Can you control it?" Sirval looked at him with something like hope. "Control," she repeated. "Try. Learning." She closed her eyes, and the glow around her dimmed. The air stopped thrumming with that subsonic pressure Elias hadn't realized he'd been feeling. When she opened her eyes again, there was exhaustion in them, but also determination. "Better?" she asked. "Better," Elias confirmed. They stood there in his shed, surrounded by spare parts and stolen moments, two people who shouldn't exist in each other's worlds, both carrying the weight of wars they hadn't started. Rusty pushed between them and sat down, looking up at both of them expectantly. "You know what's strange," Elias said. 3 days ago, my biggest problem was whether I was going to run out of coffee or whiskey first. Now I'm harboring an alien refugee who's accidentally haunting an entire colony with psychic flashbacks." Sirval tilted her head. "Strange." "Yeah," Elias said, and found himself almost smiling. "But I've had worse roommates." She didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. That crystalline laugh again, like bells in a storm. Outside, the colony lights flickered once, then stabilized, and somewhere in the distance an investigation team was gathering equipment, preparing to track down the source of the energy signature. Elias looked at Sirval, at the hope and fear warring in her expression, and made a decision he'd probably regret. "We need to teach you more words," he said, "starting with hide, lie, and probably run like hell." Sirval smiled. It was the first time he'd seen her do it, and it transformed her alien features into something almost human. "Run like hell," she repeated carefully. "Good words." "The best words," Elias agreed, and wondered if this was what hope felt like, or just a different flavor of crazy. The investigation team arrived on schedule, and Elias spent the morning doing what he did best, being professionally forgettable. Yes, he'd noticed power fluctuations. No, he hadn't seen anything unusual. Yes, he'd check his equipment for interference. No, he didn't mind them scanning the area. Why would he mind? He watched from the mining site as they swept the sector with enough scanning equipment to detect a mouse's heartbeat from orbit. Meanwhile, Serval was exactly where he'd left her, sealed in the underground maintenance tunnel beneath his shed, her bioluminescence dimmed to nothing, wrapped in every thermal blanket he owned to mask her energy signature. The team left at 1500 hours, frustrated and empty-handed. Elias waited until 1700 before letting her out. She emerged looking exhausted, her crystalline skin dim, but when she saw him, she managed that smile that was becoming familiar. "Hide," she said proudly. "Success." "Yeah," Elias agreed. "Now we just have to do that every time they sweep the sector." Which, given how bureaucratic colonial administration is, probably means weekly. Forever. She tilted her head at the words she didn't know but got the general tone. "Problem?" "Massive problem, but we'll figure it out. Come on, you look like you need food." While she ate, Elias tried to explain the situation. It took 20 minutes, 3 improvised diagrams, and a lot of creative gesturing, but eventually Serval seemed to grasp that the humans were looking for her. "They know?" she asked quietly. "They suspect something. They don't know it's you. They don't know you're Zirathi." He paused. "They don't know Zirathi still exist." That got a reaction. Serval went very still, her glow flickering like a candle in wind. "Exist?" she whispered. "You think my people are dead?" "The war ended 200 years ago," Elias said carefully. "The Zirathi Empire collapsed. No one's seen your kind since." He watched her face. "You didn't know?" Serval closed her eyes. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that made the air vibrate. "I was queen," she said in halting English. "Tried to stop war. Tried to make peace." She touched the cracks in her crystalline skin. "My people said no. Said I was weak. Betrayer." She made a gesture like closing a box. "They put me in crystal prison. Left me to sleep. Forever." "Jesus," Elias breathed. "Your own people did that." "I destroyed Empire to save it," Serval said. "They destroyed me for trying." They sat with that for a while. Rusty, sensing the mood, pressed against Serval's leg in mechanical comfort. She ran her fingers over his sensors absently. "So you're not an invader," Elias said. "You're a refugee, a political prisoner who just happened to sleep through the last 2 centuries." "Refugee," Serval tested the word. "Yes, refugee." She looked at him. "You are soldier. I am enemy. Why save me?" Elias thought about Sarah's face, about Ben's laugh, about the weight of that photo frame and 3 years of trying to forget. "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe I'm tired of letting people die." Before Serval could respond, she straightened suddenly, her expression shifting to something alert. "Sound," she said, pointing to herself. "Want to share sound." She started humming. It wasn't quite music, more like vibration made audible, but there was a melody buried in the harmonics, something sad and old and hauntingly familiar. Elias felt something catch in his chest. "Wait," he said. He went to his quarters and came back with the guitar, Sarah's guitar, the one she'd played to get Ben to sleep, the one that hadn't been touched in 3 years. He managed 3 chords before his fingers remembered the rest. The lullaby Sarah used to sing, simple melody, old as humanity. Serval's humming stopped. She stared at him, those golden eyes wide. "No song," she said. "Different words, same sound, same meaning." "That's impossible," Elias said. She hummed again, and this time he heard it, the same intervals, the same pattern, like their species had independently discovered the same musical truth. My mother sang, Sirval said quietly. Before war, before Queen, she sang this. Sarah sang it to our son, Elias replied. They looked at each other across the gulf of species and history and war, connected by something as simple as a lullaby. The moment shattered with a knock on the door. Elias moved fast, gesturing for Sirval to hide. She dropped behind the equipment cache, dimming her glow to nothing. Rusty sat in front of her, casual as could be. Elias opened the door. The woman standing there wore a colonial defense uniform with colonel's insignia. 40-something, with the kind of eyes that had seen combat and hadn't forgotten. Her name tag read, Thrace. Elias Dorn? She said. That's me. I'm Colonel Mara Thrace, Colonial Defense. I have some questions about the energy signature we detected. Already talked to the investigation team, Elias said, keeping his voice bored. Told them everything I know. I'm sure you did, Thrace said, her eyes scanning past him into the shed. But I'd like to hear it again. Funny thing about that energy signature. Our analysts say it matches Zirathi biocrystal emissions, which is interesting, since the Zirathi are supposed to be extinct. Elias felt his heart rate spike, but kept his expression neutral. Lots of crystal in the ground here. Maybe it's residue from the old war. Maybe, Thrace agreed, but her eyes said she didn't believe him. Mind if I look around? Got a warrant? Do I need one? They stared at each other for a long moment. Then Thrace smiled, cold and professional. Not yet. But, Mr. Dorn, if there's something out here that threatens this colony, I will find it. And if someone's been hiding it, they're going to have a very bad day. She turned to leave, then paused. I lost my brother to the Zirathi. Bombardment strike. Civilian target. 208 years ago. So if there's even a chance one of those bastards is still breathing, you can bet I'm going to find them. She walked away, leaving Elias standing in the doorway, Rusty's sensors pulsing alarm behind him, and Sirval's barely controlled breathing, the only sound in the sudden silence. When he finally closed the door, Sirval emerged from hiding. She'd heard everything. She will kill me, Sirval said simply. Not if we're careful. If I must flee, Sirval said, reaching out to place something in his hand. A fragment of crystal, warm and pulsing. You come with me. Elias looked at the crystal, then at her face. Yeah, he said quietly. We're officially past the point of no return, aren't we? Sirval nodded, and somewhere in the colony, Colonel Thrace was making calls, pulling files, preparing to uncover whatever was hiding in Sector 9. The clock was ticking. Elias spent the next 2 days teaching Sirval to play guitar, while simultaneously preparing escape routes and lying to colonial defense with increasing creativity. So the frets are like steps, he explained, guiding her crystalline fingers to the strings. Each one gives you a different note, like this. He played a simple chord. Sirval mimicked it, and the sound that emerged was something guitars weren't supposed to be capable of. Harmonics layered over harmonics, like she was playing 3 instruments at once. That's not... How did you... Elias shook his head. Never mind. That's amazing. Amazing, she repeated, testing the word. Then she played the chord again, adding that Zirathi melody she'd hummed before, the lullaby. Elias picked up the human version, and for a moment they were making music together. Rusty's sensors pulsed in rhythm, the mechanical dog swaying slightly. Sirval stopped playing and looked at Rusty. Then she made a sound Elias had never heard before. She was laughing. Not the crystalline chuckle from before, but full, genuine laughter that sounded like bells falling through water. Her whole body seemed to light up with it, bioluminescence pulsing in patterns that might have been joy translated to color. Rusty, apparently thinking this was a game, started spinning in circles, which made Sirval laugh harder, which made Rusty spin faster. Elias found himself laughing too, helpless against the absurdity of it all. A human, an alien queen, and a mechanical dog, having a moment of pure stupid happiness in a mining colony at the edge of nowhere. When they finally caught their breath, Serval looked at him with those golden eyes and said, "Thank you." "For what?" "For reminding me. I was queen, commander, warrior." She touched her chest. "Forgot how to be just person. Just Serval." "Yeah," Elias said quietly. "I get that." They played for another hour, developing a hybrid version of the lullaby that was neither fully human nor fully Zirathi, but something entirely new. Something that would have been impossible if they'd met during the war. If they'd met as soldier and queen instead of miner and refugee. As they played, something strange happened. The dreams that had been plaguing the colony changed. Instead of nightmares and violent memories, people reported sleeping peacefully, waking up feeling calm, like someone was singing them to sleep. Elias's comm unit buzzed with reports, colonists thanking him for fixing whatever power problem had been causing the disturbances. They thought it was electromagnetic interference, now corrected. They had no idea they'd been hearing an alien queen learning to make music again. It was almost perfect, almost peaceful, right up until Colonial Defense found the evidence. The call came at 2100 hours, not to Elias, to the entire colony. Emergency broadcast, mandatory viewing. He and Serval watched on his small display as Colonel Thrace's face filled the screen. "Attention all Sector 9 personnel. Analysis of the energy signature has confirmed our worst fears. We have detected active Zirathi biocrystal emissions in this sector. This represents a possible threat to colony safety. An elimination team is being deployed. All residents are ordered to report any Zirathi activity immediately." The screen cut to archived footage from the war. Zirathi dreadnoughts turning cities to ash. Battlefields covered in crystal and corpses. The propaganda was old, but effective, dredging up 200 years of fear and hatred. Then Thrace's face again. Harder now. Personal. "The Zirathi nearly destroyed humanity. We will not give them a second chance. If you see something, say something. Elimination authorization is in effect." The broadcast ended. Elias looked at Serval. She'd understood enough. Her glow had dimmed to almost nothing, and she was making herself small again, like she had that first night. "Elimination," she said quietly. "Kill. They don't know it's you specifically. They don't know you're here." "They will find me," Serval said with absolute certainty. "I cannot hide forever. Energy leaks. Dreams leak. I am broken thing that cannot stop being broken. Then we fix you. Cannot fix. This is what I am now." She looked at the guitar, at Rusty, at Elias's face. "I should go, before you are hurt because of me." "Yeah," Elias said. "About that? No." She tilted her head. "No? I've spent 3 years running away from everything. I'm done running. We'll figure this out." "They will kill you too, for hiding enemy." "Probably," Elias agreed. "But here's the thing. You're not the enemy. You never were. You were a queen trying to stop a war, and your people punished you for it. The only crime you committed was giving a damn about peace when everyone else wanted blood." Serval's eyes went very bright. "You understand?" "Yeah, I understand." Elias picked up the guitar. "Play with me, one more time, while we still can." They played the hybrid lullaby, and this time Serval sang, words in Zirathi, ancient and beautiful, while Elias hummed the melody Sarah used to sing. The sound filled the shed, and Rusty sat between them, sensors pulsing in contentment. Outside, the colony slept peacefully, caught in the wake of whatever power Serval carried. Dreams of childhood lullabies and safety they couldn't quite explain. And in Colonial Defense Headquarters, Colonel Thrace received new orders. Priority Black. 3 words that ended arguments and started body counts. Eliminate the threat. She looked at the tactical map, at the energy signature that kept centering on one specific location. Sector 9, Mining Site 7. Elias Dorn's operation. Thrace pulled her brother's service photo from her desk drawer, looked at his face, frozen at 19, before the Zirathi had turned him into ash and memory. "For you, Jamie," she whispered. Then she started assembling her team. Back in the shed, Elias and Sirval finished their song. The last notes hung in the air like prayer. "If they come," Sirval said, "I will not fight. I will not be monster they believe I am." "If they come," Elias replied, "we're both going to be really creative about the definition of peaceful resistance." She laughed again, softer this time, sad. "You are very strange human, Elias Dorn." "Yeah," he agreed, "but I'm your strange human, and that's going to have to be enough." They sat together in the quiet, making what peace they could with the dawn they knew was coming. And in the distance, engines were already warming up. The files were old, encrypted, locked behind security protocols that should have been impossible to crack with mining equipment and a mechanical dog. Should have been. Elias had forgotten that Sirval was, before everything else, a queen who'd commanded fleets, and queens knew things about technology that miners didn't. "Here," she said, pointing at the data crystal she'd interfaced with directly, her crystalline fingers conducting electricity like they were made for it. "Archive. Old, very old." The holographic display flickered to life, and Elias found himself watching history nobody was supposed to see. First contact, 306 years ago. The Zirathi and humans meeting for the first time. The footage showed diplomats from both sides, awkward but hopeful, trading technology, sharing culture, actually building something that looked like friendship. Then the screen showed a different scene, a diplomatic compound. Zirathi and human delegates working together on a joint colony project. Children playing, human and Zirathi, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "We were allies," Sirval whispered. "I did not know. They never told us." The next file made Elias's blood run cold. A human diplomat, dead, killed by a Zirathi extremist who believed integration was betrayal. The footage showed the Zirathi government offering reparations, justice, continued cooperation. It showed the human government refusing, demanding territorial concessions, military access, things that had nothing to do with justice and everything to do with expansion. And when the Zirathi refused, both governments had found their excuse: war, manufactured, maintained, both sides feeding propaganda to their people, erasing the history of cooperation, rewriting first contact as hostile, turning allies into enemies because it was easier to conquer when you had righteousness on your side. "It was a lie," Elias said, his voice hollow. "The whole thing. Sarah died for a lie. Ben died for a lie." More files flashed past. Footage of Sirval, centuries younger, standing before a Zirathi council. Her voice was different, stronger, more commanding. But the message was clear even without translation. She was begging them to stop, to remember what they'd been before the war. The footage showed her being seized, crystalline bonds wrapping around her, her voice breaking as she pleaded. Then darkness, imprisonment, a queen buried alive for the crime of remembering the truth. "They called me traitor," Sirval said, tears tracking light down her crystalline face. "Because I refused to forget." That night the dreams came again, but this time they weren't subtle. This time every person in the colony experienced the same vision simultaneously. Sirval's power, agitated by emotion, amplified by the neural quartz in the ground, broadcasting with such intensity that even those awake saw it behind their eyes. They saw the war, both sides of it, human soldiers watching in horror as they realized the intelligence was wrong. Again. Always wrong. Children's shelters marked as military targets, civilian transports identified as troop carriers. A war machine grinding forward on lies nobody wanted to acknowledge because stopping meant admitting complicity. And Zirathi warriors, following orders they didn't understand, destroying enemies they'd once called friends, watching their empire consume itself in manufactured rage. Elias saw it all, experienced it all, felt the moment when the pilot locked onto Sarah's shelter, heard his prayers that this was right, that the command was accurate, that the screaming children his sensors detected were somehow enemy combatants. Saw the pilot crying as he fired. Saw him die 3 days later, shot down over human territory, his last thoughts for his own daughter back home. The dream released them all at once. The colony woke up screaming, or crying, or simply staring at nothing, processing what they'd seen. Elias stumbled outside and vomited. When he could breathe again, he found Sirval in the corner of the shed, making herself as small as possible. "I did not mean," she said brokenly, "could not control. They will know now. They will know it is me." She was right. The colony-wide psychic incident had pinpointed the source. Every scanner, every sensor, every piece of equipment pointed directly at Sector 9. Elias's comm unit erupted with alerts. Then he heard the engines. Not just one ship, a full tactical squad. Coming fast. "They are here," Sirval said unnecessarily. Elias grabbed the plasma cutter. "Get in the tunnel, now. I will not hide while you die for me. Then we'll both be idiots together. Move!" The first troops kicked in the door as Sirval dropped through the floor hatch. Elias barely got it closed before Colonel Thrace walked in, weapon raised, a full squad behind her. "Elias Dorn," she said coldly, "step away from the hatch." "Can't do that, Colonel. The energy signature is directly beneath this structure. You've been harboring a Zirathi. That's treason." "That's saving a life," Elias corrected. "There's a difference." "Not to me." Thrace gestured, and 2 soldiers moved forward. That's when Rusty moved. The mechanical dog launched himself at the nearest soldier, sensors screaming alert, not attacking, just interfering, buying seconds. "Rusty, no!" Elias shouted. Thrace didn't hesitate. She fired. The plasma bolt caught Rusty mid-leap, and the mechanical dog crashed to the floor, systems sparking, dying. Elias screamed. Below them, the hatch exploded open. Sirval rose like a golden nightmare, and for the first time, Elias saw her as the queen she'd been, terrible and beautiful and absolutely done with running. "No more," she said, and her voice shook the building. The soldiers fired. The shots stopped mid-air, frozen in fields of crystalline energy that Sirval manifested with a gesture. She wasn't attacking them. She was protecting, shielding, showing them exactly how restrained she'd been, how much power she'd been hiding. She could have killed them all. They knew it. She knew it. Instead, she knelt by Rusty's broken body, and the tears that fell from her eyes were pure light. "He chose," she said to Elias. "Machine with no life chose to protect, chose to love, and you let him die because you thought I was worth saving." Thrace stood frozen, weapon still raised, but her hand was shaking. "You're Zirathi," she said. "You killed my brother. Your kind murdered billions." "Yes," Sirval said simply. "And your kind murdered billions too. And both our governments lied about all of it. I know, you felt my memories, you saw truth. So did everyone in this colony. That doesn't change what happened. No, but maybe it can change what happens next." Thrace's weapon lowered slightly, just slightly, doubt warring with duty in her eyes. Then Elias, cradling Rusty's broken chassis, said the words that would either save them or doom them. "Transmit the files, all of them. Show everyone what we just saw. Let them decide if they want to keep fighting a war that should never have started." He looked at Thrace. "You lost your brother. I lost my family. How many more families die before we admit we were played?" Thrace stared at him, at Sirval, at the crystalline field still holding her soldiers' weapons frozen. Then she made a decision that would change everything. She lowered her weapon completely. "Upload the files," she told her squad. "All of them. Unencrypted broadcast. Let everyone see." "Colonel, that's against orders," a soldier protested. "Fuck the orders," Thrace said. "I'm done killing for lies." And somewhere in the colony, the truth started to spread. The broadcast went out at 300 hours. By 400, 3 colonial governments had issued denials. By 0500, 6 more had started internal investigations. By 0600, the entire frontier was on fire with debate, and by 0700, the Girathi extremist faction had arrived. They came in a ship that looked like it was grown rather than built, all organic curves and bioluminescent veins. It dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly over Carthune, with the kind of precision that spoke to military training. The message they broadcast was simple: "Return our queen, or we take her." Elias watched the ship through the shed's cracked window. Serval stood beside him, her glow dimmed, exhausted from the power she'd expended saving Thrace's soldiers. "Your people?" Elias said. "My enemies," Serval corrected. "The ones who imprisoned me, who want war more than peace." She touched the pieces of rusty that Elias had gathered, arranged on his workbench like relics. Her fingers traced the sensor array that would never pulse again. "He was just machine," she said quietly. "But he chose to defend friend, chose to be brave." She looked at Elias. "I destroyed my empire to stop war, and you destroyed yourself to save me. Why?" Elias had been asking himself that question for days. Now, with Zirathi warships overhead and colonial forces surrounding his shed, he finally had an answer. Because someone has to be the idiot who gives a damn. Serval made that sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob. "Idiot," she repeated. "Good word." Outside, Thrace was coordinating with colonial defense. The situation was spiraling. The Zirathi ship had been joined by 3 others, old warships, remnants of the Empire, still carrying weapons that could crack planets. Elias's comm unit buzzed. Thrace's face appeared, and she looked older than she had 12 hours ago. "They're demanding, Serval. Command wants me to turn her over." "Are you going to?" Thrace was quiet for a long moment. "I saw what you broadcast. I felt those memories. My brother died following orders from people who knew they were lying, and I almost added to that body count." She looked at something off-screen. "But I'm out of options here, Dorn. They have enough firepower to glass this colony." "Let me talk to them," Serval said, stepping into view of the comm. "That's not a good idea," Thrace started. "It is only idea," Serval corrected. "They want Queen. They will have Queen." Before anyone could stop her, Serval walked outside. Elias ran after her, grabbing her arm. "What are you doing?" "What I should have done 200 years ago, facing them. They're going to kill you, or worse. Perhaps, but perhaps they will listen." She touched his face, her crystalline fingers surprisingly warm. "You taught me something, Elias Dorn. You taught me that giving damn is not weakness, is strength." She pulled away from him gently and walked toward the clearing where the Zirathi ship had landed. The hatch opened and they emerged. 5 of them, each nearly as tall as Serval, covered in darker crystal that pulsed with red instead of gold. Warriors, the kind that had burned cities during the war. Their leader spoke in Zirathi, voice like grinding stone. Elias couldn't understand the words, but the tone was clear. Accusation, condemnation. Serval responded, and even though Elias didn't know the language, he recognized the cadence. She was defending herself, defending her choice, defending peace. The leader struck her. The blow sent Serval to her knees, cracks spreading through her crystalline skin. Elias started forward, but Thrace caught his arm. "Don't. You'll start a war." "She's dying. She's talking. Let her talk." Serval rose slowly. "Blood, if you could call the luminous fluid that dripped from her mouth." She spoke again, quieter now, gesturing at the colony, at Elias, at the sky, where both human and Zirathi ships hung in tense orbit. The leader hesitated. Then Serval did something that made Elias's heart stop. She knelt, bowed her head, the full submission of a queen acknowledging defeat. The Zirathi warriors looked at each other, uncertain. And that's when Elias understood. She wasn't surrendering to them. She was showing them what surrender looked like, what it meant to choose peace over pride. He ran forward, ignoring Thrace's shout, dropped to his knees beside Sirval in the dust. "The hell with protocol," he said loudly. "You want to take her? You go through me first." It was the stupidest, most futile gesture imaginable. One human, unarmed, facing down 5 alien warriors who could kill him with a thought. But Thrace saw what he was doing. She walked forward, knelt beside him. Then another soldier. Then another. Within minutes, 30 human soldiers had formed a line, all of them kneeling, all of them between the Zirathi warriors and their queen. The Zirathi leader stared at the scene. At humans who had every reason to hate his kind, protecting a Zirathi queen with their bodies. He spoke again, confusion in his voice. Sirval lifted her head. "They choose peace," she translated for Elias. "He asks why." "Tell him," Elias said, voice rough, "that we're all tired of dying for lies. Tell him that a mechanical dog taught us more about loyalty than any government ever did. Tell him that if they want to restart this war, they'll have to kill every person in this colony first." Sirval translated. The words hung in the air like a challenge. The Zirathi leader looked at his warriors, at the humans kneeling in defense of their ancient enemy, at Sirval, broken and bleeding, still trying to protect the people who'd imprisoned her for wanting peace. He lowered his weapon, spoke one word in Zirathi that Sirval translated as witness. Then he and his warriors backed toward their ship. But before they left, the leader turned back, said something else. "He says," Sirval whispered, "that I am still traitor. But perhaps traitor was right all along." The Zirathi ship lifted off, leaving them in the dust. Elias helped Sirval to her feet. She was shaking, barely able to stand. "Did we just win?" he asked. "I do not know," Sirval admitted. "But we did not lose." Thrace approached, and for the first time since they'd met, she looked at Sirval without hatred. "You're a fucking idiot," she told Elias. "Yeah," he agreed. "But I'm in good company." Thrace almost smiled. "Command is going to have my head for this." "Probably. But hey, you're already court-martialed for uploading those files. Might as well go all in." They walked back to the shed together, this impossible alliance of former enemies and soldiers who'd chosen to disobey, while overhead, both human and Zirathi fleets watched and waited to see what would happen next. Inside, Elias gathered the pieces of Rusty one more time. "We should do something," he said. "Build something. To remember." "Yes," Sirval agreed, "for the machine who taught us what it means to choose." And somewhere in the data streams, the files they'd released continued to spread, infecting both species with the most dangerous thing imaginable, the truth. The memorial for Rusty happened at dawn, and nobody was quite sure who'd organized it. Someone had welded his broken parts into a sculpture that looked almost alive. Someone else had planted luminescent flowers around the base. By the time Elias arrived, there were 40 people standing around it, human and Zirathi both, and more arriving every minute. The Zirathi were refugees, Sirval explained, families who'd hidden when the Empire fell, living in the shadows for 2 centuries, waiting for it to be safe to emerge. The broadcast had reached them, shown them their lost queen, brought them home. An old Zirathi male approached Sirval, spoke in their language. She responded, her voice breaking. "He says," she translated for Elias, "that he thought he was last, thought all others died. He has been alone for 80 years. Tell him he's not alone anymore." More Zirathi arrived throughout the morning, not warriors, farmers, engineers, artists. The survivors who'd chosen peace over empire even before Sirval had tried to end the war. By noon the colony had tripled in population, and Thrace was having a crisis trying to figure out housing. "This is insane," she muttered, looking at the crowd. "A week ago we were enemies. Now I'm running refugee logistics." "Could be worse," Elias pointed out. "How?" They could all be staying at my place." Thrace almost laughed. The situation spiraled further when both governments started issuing statements. The Human Colonial Council called for measured response and investigation. The Zirathi remnant faction demanded Sirval's immediate return for proper judgment. Neither side was ready to admit the war had been manufactured. Neither side wanted to face what that meant about the centuries of killing they'd justified. But the people, human and Zirathi both, they'd seen the truth, felt it, and they weren't interested in going back to comfortable lies. Protests erupted across 12 colonies. Zirathi refugees came out of hiding on 6 different worlds. The governments were losing control of the narrative, and everyone knew it, which meant they'd try to take it back by force. The warnings came at 1800 hours. Both human and Zirathi military fleets were converging on Carthun, not to negotiate, to eliminate the problem before it spread further. Eliminate Sirval, eliminate the witnesses, eliminate the truth. Elias found Sirval in the memorial garden, sitting beside Rusty's sculpture. She was singing softly, that hybrid lullaby they'd created together. "They're coming," he said. "I know. I can feel the ships. So many." She touched the sculpture. He was good machine. Deserved better than this. "We all do." She looked at him with those golden eyes. "There is way to stop them, to make them feel what we felt. Force empathy. The dreams, you can broadcast again." "Oh, with crystal amplification, yes. Could reach both fleets. Make them experience war from both sides. Make them see truth." She paused. "But it would require all my power. All my life force. Would burn me out like star-going nova." "No," Elias said immediately. "We find another way. There is no other way. They come to kill. I can make them understand, or we all die anyway." "Then we die," Elias said stubbornly. "But I'm not letting you sacrifice yourself." "Is not your choice." "The hell it isn't. We're partners in idiocy, remember?" They glared at each other in the fading light. Then Thrace approached, and she wasn't alone. She had engineers, both human and Zirathi, carrying equipment. "What if," Thrace said, "we could distribute the load? Use the neural quartz network in the ground as a transmission array. Multiple broadcast points. Sirval provides the signal. The crystals amplify and distribute it." One of the Zirathi engineers, a female with soft blue bioluminescence, spoke up. "Theory is sound. Would require Queen to sing, not just transmit. Song carries better than raw memory." "The lullaby," Elias said, "the hybrid version." Sirval straightened. "You would help? Risk yourselves?" "Someone has to be the idiots who give a damn," Thrace said dryly. "Apparently it's contagious." They worked through the night, setting up transmission nodes across the colony. Zirathi engineers interfacing with human technology, creating something neither species could have built alone. The hybrid song was encoded into crystal matrices, ready to broadcast on Sirval's signal. At Oro 400, one of the colonists approached with food, then another, then 20 more, bringing supplies, offering help, refusing to leave. By dawn, the entire population of Carthun stood ready, united by nothing more than the stubborn refusal to let history repeat. Elias found a quiet moment with Sirval before the fleets arrived. "If this works," he said, "what happens to you?" "I do not know. Have never channeled this much power. Could burn out, could die, could just be very tired. Those are terrible odds." "Yes, but better than certainty of death for everyone." She touched his face again. "You gave me reason to live again, Elias Dorn. Showed me that peace was worth fighting for. Whatever happens next, know that you saved me long before I saved anyone else." "Sirval?" "Then we break together," she said, echoing his words from days before. "Yes?" He wanted to argue, wanted to find another way. But he knew the same thing she did. Sometimes giving a damn meant risking everything. "Together," he agreed. The fleets dropped out of faster-than-light travel at 800 hours. 63 human ships, 47 Zirathi. All of them armed, all of them ready for war. The colony activated the broadcast array, and Sirval began to sing. The song started soft. Just Sirval's voice, that crystalline harmony that had once broken glass, now focused into something pure and heartbreaking. The lullaby, the one that existed in both human and Zirathi memory, the melody that predated war. The transmission nodes amplified it, sent it cascading through the neural quartz network, up through the atmosphere, touching every ship in orbit. In the Colonial Defense flagship, Admiral Chen was giving the order to fire when the song hit him. He staggered, hand frozen over the weapon's control. Suddenly 7 years old again, his mother singing him to sleep after nightmares. Safe. Loved. Home. On the Zirathi command vessel, War Prime Krithax was calculating firing solutions when his vision blurred. He was a nestling again, his mother's voice vibrating through their shared crystal cradle, teaching him the old songs before the war made them forget music existed. The song built. Sirval's voice grew stronger, and the neural quartz responded, creating harmonics that shouldn't have been possible. Every person in both fleets heard it, felt it, remembered what it meant to be small and safe and loved. Then the memories came. Not violent, not forced, just shared, like someone opening a door and inviting you to see what was on the other side. Admiral Chen saw through Krethax's eyes, watched as the Zirathi received orders to bombard a human colony, felt his revulsion, his desperate attempts to verify the target, his horror when he realized too late that intelligence had been wrong. Again. Felt him die 3 days later, shot down by human fighters, his last thoughts for the daughter he'd never see again. Krethax saw through human soldier Mera Thrace's eyes, watched her brother die in a Zirathi attack, felt her grief twist into hatred, felt her spend decades hunting Zirathi, convinced she was serving justice, felt the moment she realized she'd been serving lies. On ship after ship, human and Zirathi, the song worked its way through defenses built over centuries, showed them each other, made them feel what their enemy had felt, the fear, the grief, the desperate hope that maybe this time the orders would make sense. A human gunner saw himself through Zirathi eyes, just another scared kid following orders. A Zirathi warrior saw herself through human eyes, a mother fighting to protect her nest. They saw the leaders who'd lied, the politicians who'd manufactured hatred, the propaganda that had turned allies into enemies. They saw the moment the war could have stopped, the peace negotiations that had been sabotaged, the olive branches burned before they could be offered. They saw 200 years of killing and understood it had all been preventable. The song built to a crescendo, and Sirval was burning now, her crystalline body glowing so bright that people had to shield their eyes. Cracks spread through her skin, but she kept singing, pouring everything she had left into the transmission. Elias ran forward, tried to catch her as she collapsed. She was too hot to touch, but he didn't care. He wrapped his arms around her, adding his voice to hers, humming the human melody while she sang the Zirathi words. Other voices joined. The colonists, human and Zirathi, picking up the song. The engineers at the transmission nodes, Thrace, her voice rough but determined. The song became a chorus, a prayer, a demand that the universe acknowledge what they'd learned. In orbit, the first ship powered down its weapons, then another, then 10. The human flagship broadcast a single word: ceasefire. The Zirathi command vessel responded, agreed, but it wasn't over, not yet. The extremist Zirathi faction, the ones who'd come for Sirval before, they fought the song, shielded their minds, prepared to fire anyway because acknowledging the truth meant admitting their entire existence had been built on lies. Their weapons charged, and Sirval, barely conscious in Elias's arms, did something impossible. She opened her eyes, looked directly at the extremist ship, and forgave them. The emotion poured through the song, not just words, pure feeling, understanding, acknowledgement of their pain, their loss, their desperate need to believe the war had meant something, and the offer of a different path. The extremist commander, the same one who'd struck Sirval days before, felt it hit him like a physical blow. He staggered, looked at his weapons console, at his crew, at the choice that would define everything that came next. His hand hovered over the fire control. Then he lowered it. "Stand down," he ordered. His voice shook. "Stand down." The song ended. Sirval went limp in Elias's arms, her glow dimming to almost nothing. Crystal skin cracked and bleeding light. "No," Elias said. "No, you stay here. You stay with me." Her eyes flickered open. "Did it work?" "Yeah, it worked. They're standing down, all of them." "Good. That is good. Don't you dare die on me, not after all this." She smiled, faint and exhausted. Not dying, just tired. So tired. The ships began to land, not attacking. Descending peacefully. Soldiers emerged, human and Zirathi, and they weren't carrying weapons. They walked toward the colony square, toward the memorial to Rusty, toward the spot where Elias held Sirval. The first to kneel was Admiral Chen, then Kruthax, then more. Hundreds of them, from both fleets, kneeling in the dust of a mining colony at the edge of nowhere, kneeling before a queen who'd given everything for peace, and before a miner who'd decided that one person giving a damn was enough to start changing the universe. Sirval looked at the scene, her golden eyes dimming. "They bow to you?" Elias laughed, the sound half-sob. "Nah, they're bowing to the idiot who gave a damn first. That is you. That's both of us." Thrace approached, dropped to one knee. "You're a fucking idiot, Dorn." "Best compliment I've ever received." "And you," Thrace said to Sirval. "Thank you, for showing us we were better than we thought we were." Sirval's hand found Elias's, held tight. Medical teams rushed forward, human and Zirathi doctors working together to stabilize her. They carried her to emergency care, and Elias never let go of her hand. Around them, two former enemy fleets began the slow work of learning to talk to each other, of sharing food, of building something new from the ashes of the old. And overhead, more ships were arriving. Not warships, colony vessels, refugee ships, families, human and Zirathi, coming to see the place where everything changed, where a mechanical dog taught them about loyalty, where a queen remembered how to sing, where a miner proved that giving a damn was the most powerful weapon in the universe. The war was over. Not because anyone won, but because they'd all chosen to stop fighting. 6 months later, Elias Dorn stood in the middle of what used to be his mining colony and tried to remember what silence sounded like. Impossible, given that Carthun had become the least quiet place in the known universe. The memorial to Rusty had been expanded into a full plaza. Someone, probably one of the Zirathi artists, had added water features that made his optical sensors look like they were still blinking. Children played around it, human and Zirathi, using the statue as base for some elaborate game that seemed to involve a lot of shrieking and laughter. Beyond the plaza, the colony had transformed. Human prefab structures stood beside organic Zirathi bioarchitecture, creating a hybrid style that architects were already calling the Carthun standard. Markets mixed both species goods. Restaurants served fusion cuisine that would have been impossible 6 months ago. The reconciliation, as everyone was calling it, had spread to 17 colonies and was still growing. Not everyone was happy about it. The extremist factions on both sides still existed, still plotted, still believed the old ways were better, but they were losing ground every day that passed without new violence. Every day that proved peace was possible. Elias made his way through the crowd to the administrative center. Thrace was there, looking exhausted and possibly drunk. "Tell me again why I let them make me governor," she said by way of greeting. "Because you're good at yelling at bureaucrats and nobody else wanted the job." "Accurate." She slid a bottle across the desk. "Drink with me. I just spent 3 hours mediating a property dispute between a human farmer and a Zirathi engineer. They both want the same plot of land." "What did you decide?" "Told them to build something together, or I'd give it to someone else. They're currently designing a hybrid greenhouse. I think I'm getting the hang of this. Elias took a drink. You hear about the council? Which one? We've got 5 different governments trying to claim jurisdiction. The Colonial Council. They're officially recognizing Zirathi sovereignty. Separate but equal governments, mutual defense pact, the whole thing. Thrace stared at him. Are you kidding? Apparently, they're calling it the Rusty Accords. Someone thought it would be poetic. A mechanical dog is now the foundation of interstellar law. This timeline is insane. Best timeline, though? Debatable. But Thrace was smiling. Elias finished his drink and headed to the medical center. It had been expanded 3 times to handle the volume of both species seeking treatment. Human doctors learning Zirathi biology, Zirathi healers adapting human techniques. Medicine advancing faster in 6 months than it had in decades. He found Siraval in her usual spot, working with a group of younglings, teaching them the old songs. She'd survived the broadcast, but it had cost her. The bioluminescence that had once covered her body was gone, faded to barely visible. Her crystalline skin had dulled to something closer to opaque stone. She looked, as she'd once joked, common. Elias thought she'd never been more beautiful. "Elias," she said, her voice still carrying those crystalline harmonics even if her body didn't glow anymore. "Come, listen." The children, mixed group of human and Zirathi, were singing the hybrid lullaby. Their voices blended imperfectly, enthusiastically, creating something that was neither species' version but entirely their own. When they finished, Siraval praised them and sent them off to play. Then she turned to Elias, those golden eyes still bright even if nothing else about her was. "Walk with me." They made their way to the edge of the settlement where new graves had been established. The Memorial Garden, they called it, a place to honor the dead from both sides of the war. Sarah and Ben's names were there, carved into crystal. Elias had finally been able to give them a marker, to acknowledge them without drowning in the grief. Siraval had taught him that, how to carry the weight without letting it crush you. "I have been thinking," she said, placing her own crystal fragment on the grave as she always did when they visited, "about what comes next. The treaty negotiations? No, about us, about this." She gestured at the colony, at the impossible thing they'd built. "It is fragile, yes? Could break at any moment. Yeah, probably will, eventually, nothing lasts forever. But while it lasts, it matters. Yeah, it matters." She turned to face him fully. "I think Sarah would have liked me. I know she would have. She always said I needed friends who called me out on my bullshit. You're overqualified for the position." Siraval laughed. That sounded like bells in water that still made his heart do complicated things. "I have been offered position," she said. "Ambassador, representative, voice of Zirathi people in new government. That's amazing. You'd be perfect for it." "Yes, but it would mean leaving, traveling, speaking to councils and crowds." She paused. "Being queen again, just different kind of queen." Elias felt something cold settle in his chest. "You should do it. You'd be brilliant at it." "I know, but there is problem." "What problem?" I do not want to go alone. I want partner. Someone who reminds me that giving damn is strength, not weakness. Someone who argues with me and makes terrible coffee and builds mechanical dogs from spare parts." She stepped closer. "I want you to come with me, Elias Dorn. Be my advisor, my friend, my reminder that peace is not surrender, that caring is not defeat." Elias looked at her, at this impossible creature who'd been a queen, a prisoner, a refugee, and was now just Siraval, his friend, his partner in changing the universe. "I'm just a miner," he said. "You are man who freed trapped queen and taught 2 species how to sing together. You are exactly what we need." "Then she gave me more than freedom," Elias said quietly, looking at Sarah's name. "She gave me a reason to deserve it." Siraval nodded. "Understanding. Always understanding." They stood together as the twin suns set, painting the sky in colors that reminded Elias of both crystal and flesh, alien and human, merged into something entirely new. Behind them, the colony pulsed with life, children playing, families eating together, former enemies learning to be neighbors. It was messy and imperfect and constantly on the verge of falling apart. It was the most beautiful thing Elias had ever seen. "Okay," he said, "I'll come, on one condition." "What condition?" "We come back here sometimes, to visit Rusty, to remember where it started." "Deal." They shook on it, her crystalline hand in his calloused one, and somewhere in the colony, someone was already planning the next memorial, the next treaty, the next impossible thing. 3 months later, Elias stood on a stage in the Central Human Council chambers, Sirval beside him, watching as two species that had spent centuries killing each other signed the first official peace treaty in galactic history. It wasn't perfect. It wouldn't last forever. There would be setbacks, conflicts, moments when the old hatred would try to resurface. But for now, in this moment, it was enough. A reporter asked Elias what he thought had made the difference, what had changed the course of history. He thought about a mechanical dog, about a lullaby that existed in 2 languages, about a queen who'd chosen peace when everyone else chose war, about a miner who'd decided that one person giving a damn could start a revolution. "Someone had to be the idiot who cared," he said simply. Turns out there were a lot more idiots than anyone expected. Sirval laughed beside him, her hand finding his. And in the memorial garden on Carthun, Rusty's statue caught the light just right, making his optical sensors seem to pulse with approval. The universe was a better place than it had been 6 months ago, not because anyone had won the war, but because they'd all chosen to stop fighting. And somewhere, in the dark between the stars, old warships were being converted to colony vessels. Weapons were being melted down for building materials. Children who would have been enemies were learning to play together. The work wasn't done. It would never be done. But for the first time in 3 centuries, both species had something they'd almost forgotten existed: hope. And the stubborn, foolish, absolutely essential belief that giving a damn about each other might just save them all. Humanity, oh yeah. And Zerathi, too. Together. In the end, Elias and Sirval didn't save the galaxy through firepower or grand speeches, just the stubborn, almost ridiculous human insistence that one act of compassion can crack open centuries of hate. Turns out the universe doesn't shift because of heroes. It shifts because somebody, somewhere, finally refuses to stop giving a damn. And now the question falls to us. What would you risk if the truth demanded it? Who would you stand beside if everyone else stepped back? And what do you think breaks faster, a war, or the lies that started it? If you stayed with us all the way through this wild, emotional, slightly unhinged HFY saga, write the word "give a damn" in the comments so I know you're one of the stubborn few who'd kneel in the dust next to a miner and a crystal queen. Tell me your city. Earth is wide, but this little community feels like a single campfire across the stars. Subscribe if you want to walk with us through more universes where humanity screws up, stands up, and somehow sings its way out of disaster. Like, hype, and share this story if it meant something to you. And don't miss the next chapter already appearing on your screen. Go tap the final card and keep traveling with us.